we view conflict in relationships as a bad thing, but it can honestly be something to strengthen a relationship.
You want people to understand your intentions. Like, you don't want someone to always have to clarify their intentions.
Sometimes these conversations can be uncomfortable, especially when you're like in a moment where you're feeling pressed or triggered or heightened emotionally.
And I know direct doesn't always work for everybody, but that doesn't make me a red flag. I don't know. Would we schedule our time to go out to eat?
No.
I don't think so.
This is Sistas Declassified, the podcast where
Taylor
and Taryn,
your virtual sisters, share experiences, insights, and of course the juicy secrets that never leave the sister circle.
So shh, listen up. The Declassified convos are starting now. Welcome back to Sistas Declassified. We're the real life sisters who decided to start a podcast instead of going to a workout class.
But before we get started, we just wanted to remind you guys to like and subscribe, and you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Sistas Declassified.
Woo. That's what you usually say.
Yeah.
At that part. Okay. All right. This week, I got to get something off my chest.
What?
I'm always coming to realizing things I learned in therapy. But this wasn't totally learned in therapy. It's that therapy is helping me think about my life differently. So that's how I came to this. But
that's what it's for?
Yeah, right? So something I've learned about myself recently, and y'all can tell me if this is true about you too. And you're probably going to say this has to do with my neurodivergence. But if somebody asks me to do something, I'm there. I'm yours. Especially if you're like a friend or a loved one, someone I care about, I will be there for you in a heartbeat. Even if it's something I don't really want to do. Like, I'll weigh it against, pros and cons, risks, things like that. But like, if I can do it for you, I will. But as soon as it becomes a demand, or worse, like if I feel like you have posed your request or statement to me in a way to manipulate me, quote unquote.
If you feel like you're being used.
Well, if I feel like I'm being used, or if I feel like you think you phrase that in a way to get me to do what you want, like you're smarter than me, does not work. Immediately triggered. And the growth here is that I learned that that's how I perceive how people speak. It's not always people's intention, though there are some people with intention.
Do you have an example?
Yes. So just the other day, this is something Vashon and I encounter a lot, because this is just how he talks, and then this is how I interpret when people talk this way. He will do things like, let's say the sliding door is open. Now, I know, after having known him for 10 years, that when he phrases it this way, he actually wants something. He'll do something like, I'll have the screen door open. He'll say, you want to close the screen door? And for some reason, the phrasing of that just like...
It's passive aggressive.
It makes me so mad, because... and maybe it's just because I can't just take the words as they are, but I always have to take people's words, and then like I'm thinking 17 different ways.
Mental gymnastics.
Yes, I'm doing mental gymnastics when people speak. I'm like, why would someone ask me that? Oh, because they actually want the door closed that I opened, that I wanted open. Why didn't you just ask me to close the door? Because I would have gladly just closed the door.
But he did. He said, you want to close the door.
No. But it's like the way that it's said, like, do you want to close the door? Like, almost like and I love my husband.
It's passive aggressive.
Yeah, okay, it's passive aggressive, I suppose. But I know that that's not how he means it. He's actually just asking me that. But it says something about me that I am like so triggered.
I'm surprised he triggers. Like, well, maybe
conflict,
because I feel like he talks like me.
So it surprises you that he triggers?
I feel like I don't trigger you anymore, so I feel like he shouldn't trigger you. But maybe it's a new person.
I would say that you both still trigger me, but again, I realize that I'm the problem.
Not really, though.
But I realize that
your reaction.
My reaction is the problem, because that's not what you meant. Right. And if I need clarity, I can choose to ask what you meant. Right. So I might say, do you want the door closed?
It's called emotional intelligence.
I know. But I say all that to say, sometimes these conversations can be uncomfortable, especially when you're like in a moment where you're feeling pressed or triggered or heightened emotionally. And I think I just want to talk about conflict a little bit today
Okay.
and like just really break it down because I feel like we view conflict in relationships as a bad thing, but it can honestly be something to strengthen a relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that's my declassified moment for today. Just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's automatically a red flag. And uncomfortable doesn't always mean unhealthy because sometimes it could mean the start of something new and more real.
Mm-hmm.
So in our case, it is around like understanding each other's communication style and recognizing the love that's there and that like there's no harm meant.
Mm-hmm.
And where we meet each other in the middle is like I don't want to say he thinks about how he phrases things, but he will do his best to think about how he phrases things. And I do my best to not react because I know what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's like where the work comes in, but it makes our dynamic and our bond stronger because we're not walking around reacting to things or feeling like the other person's being passive aggressive. I ask clarifying questions when I need to, and we move forward.
Yeah. And also, like you said, he can learn to rephrase because I think that's the main thing that I learned. Like, I can recognize when I say something now that's like, okay, let me back up and say that again. I meant blah, blah, blah. And I think obviously that's a big skill because you want people to understand your intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't want someone to always have to clarify their intentions for you to be understood. And me, myself, don't want to always have to clarify myself to be understood.
That's exhausting.
It is exhausting. And also, it's like if somebody's going to always be on the defense, right, for the way that I say things, then that's not a good feeling either. And kind of goes back to that the last week's episode of like my perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I speak that way, that means people often perceive me as like being mean or short. And I wouldn't say that that's the case now because now I've recognized the issue. But back then, it was a big thing for me. So I think in sharing who I am now, it becomes harder because I'm like, who is this lady? Are they going to think, who is this lady? But after you get back comfortable with me, you're going to find out I'm still passive aggressive. Like, so I don't know. There's a balance, but I'm getting off track.
I wouldn't say you're passive aggressive. I would say you're direct, and maybe sometimes from direct to blunt. Mm-hmm. Like if it was a spectrum, you know. No, so just saying that.
No, yeah, and I know direct doesn't always work for everybody, but that doesn't make me a red flag, right? Because my intentions are never to just be like rude. I'm not talking shit about you. I'm not gossiping about you. I'm gonna keep your secrets most of the time. No, just kidding. I'm trying to keep your secrets.
Brandon knows all your secrets.
He actually doesn't. He does not give a fuck about none of my friends and all these secrets. Not like that, but like if your man cares about your friend's secrets, get a new man. But that's just my 2 cents.
Okay.
That's a topic for another date.
Okay, so before we go a little further talking about like the good and bad of conflict, I feel like it'd be important just to kind of define how we're talking about conflict here. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, we're talking about anything that you could reveal or divulge about yourself or like a preference you have that could potentially make you or the other person uncomfortable. And so like oftentimes asking people what they meant by something can feel like uncomfortable, whether it's uncomfortable for you to ask that question or you worry that the other person might be made uncomfortable by you questioning their actions. But I just wanted to make sure we were talking about conflict, not like war, but conflict in like interpersonal relationships. And that it really being about, often being about discomfort and less about there being like real tension. Like it's discomfort about the emotions that this conversation may bring.
Right. And with that discomfort is your automatic always, I'm out of here. I feel like that's a big thing these days with people. It's just like as soon as you see 1 or 2 red flags, you don't talk it out. It's just like my peace is too important, so I'm out of here.
Right. And
I'm protecting my peace.
People are at different stages in their emotional journeys. So some people know that they can't have that conversation. Some people choose not to have the conversation because they think they're
I feel like
in the right. And I think that's what you're talking about.
More people are on that side of things than they are the self-awareness side of things.
I'm not capable of having this. Yeah, you're right.
Right. Who's saying that? Nobody.
Me.
Right. Because you're in your therapy now. Before, you've probably been like, I'm out of here as well.
No, not entirely. I don't think that's entirely true.
In a conflict?
I don't think I am often in conflict.
Because when you are, you're out of there.
No.
I just made that up. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've never heard about any conflict she's ever been in.
I was like, what?
I just made that up.
But yes, I think we're touching on a little bit of the bad side of conflict that makes folks fearful, because it really can be emotionally draining, especially if you're not equipped to have the conversation, or if you even haven't processed it fully. You just know you're feeling a way,
but
and
also
you don't
maybe,
have words for it.
Maybe you haven't had conflict before, because some people come from like a place where you shove all problems down in. If there's an issue, there's nothing to talk about, whatever, you just move on. You either avoid it or you continue on like nothing happened. And so then when you get into these relationships where then you do have to have conversation in order to solve something, the conflict feels like the ultimate red flag. Like, why are we even having this problem right now? Why are we talking about this? Because ultimately, you do stuff that annoys me all the time, and I don't say about it. So why is there a problem? So then once that problem arises, it's like, okay, clearly we're not compatible. I'm going to go, and I'll see you when I see you. I feel like that happens too.
It definitely does. And I think, unfortunately, there are circumstances where like bringing things up don't go well. And so I think, particularly when we're talking about, I guess, intimate or partner relationships specifically, there's also this like risk or worry that depending on how your partner might react to something, it could lead to either emotional or physical, I guess, damage or heartbreak.
But even in like a friendship, I feel like people act like those relationships aren't valuable, but you could really sit and think about your best friend from kindergarten and know exactly who it is. And when you guys stop being friends and all that good stuff, and that's because it had an impact on you, right? So like your friendship relationships also require conflict resolution. And it doesn't actually mean that you have to move on and no longer be friends with somebody because you got into a fight. Like communication is key, not only in your romantic relationships. And why do we feel like we can just easily throw away somebody if they're our friend versus they're being our boyfriend or something? Why do we feel like that love is different? Because there's a physical intimacy level that you have with them that you don't have with your friends?
Maybe. Though I feel like there's definitely intimacy in friendship. There's just not physical usually. I mean, you might hug a friend, right?
I mean, some friends cuddle and stuff. I find that weird, but that's fine. Like, do you? Sorry, no judgment. Promise. Just don't touch me.
As someone who has cut off friends, what I can say is it has not happened without conversation, without thought. I like to think of myself as someone who is intentional. And I think in some instances it was because I knew I was not going to be able to be a good friend to you after this. And so it's probably best for us not to be, because I don't think I can be the friend to you I was before.
Yeah.
And maybe that's me making the choice for us, because they maybe could have been okay with that level of friendship or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Ultimately, talking about things that make us uncomfortable strengthens our communication, because now, like, going back to the example of me and Bashan, now we both know kind of how to talk to each other, listen to each other a little bit better. It helps build our trust in each other a little bit more, and not like feel like the other person's out to get you all the time, because you know their intention. And like you said, there's intimacy outside of just partner relationships, but in your other relationships too. And so when you bring challenges or uncomfortable conversations to each other in like a vulnerable way, it makes having those conversations a little bit easier, as opposed to, kind of being defensive about it. And I think ultimately in these conflict conversations is really like a negotiation, like knowing that each person's going to want to come out wanting to have felt like they quote unquote won. And so how can you position it so that the conversation shares like what the person's going to win out of it too?
Yeah. But I think also removing that lens that there's a win or lose because we all
I mean,
win.
that would be the best, but I think as a first step is like recognizing the other person's position too. So I think we can come in at like what I need, what I want, what's best for me, without recognizing the other person's coming in the exact same way.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I think backing up prior to the conflict, I think partly the reason the conflict ends up being this way is because we don't have enough affirmation and validation. And a lot of people are just overall insecure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you already have your internal insecurities, and then on top of that, your friend or your partner doesn't validate your presence in their life as important, or that they appreciate you, or that like they respect you, all of those things. I think that's where it makes it hard to know people's intentions when these conflicts kind of arise. So it's
Yeah,
multi-layered.
So it's like you've got to nurture from multiple sides. With conflict resolution conversations being one of the sides of nurturing it, the relationship.
And probably getting ahead of the conflict. Like, do you talk to your partner about how you fight? Like, what is
and
appropriate?
not just during a fight.
Because like that's an important question, right? It's inevitable that there's gonna be conflict with your partner. You might have conflict with your friend. It's not inevitable, but if you've been friends long enough, there might be something that came up that you didn't like. And so how do you make sure that you are already prepared for that? How do you say, like, okay, when I'm mad, I do this, or when I'm feeling sad, I do this. If I get loud, what's our code word for a timeout? Like,
yeah, those are all very real things. And I think to your point about talking to them early and often, that's just like a pulse check, just to make sure we're good, because this thing is not going to be fixed tomorrow just because we talked about it today. And so it's almost like you need regular conversation until it's a thing that doesn't bother you or the other person anymore.
And I also feel maybe some of the disconnect is that I think women feel that way more than men do. And I could be wrong. I don't know. I'll have to ask some men and survey.
That's been my experience.
But yeah, that's been my experience as well. Is I think women want to understand more and men want to be done with it more.
I think they are
not done with
to accept that things are the way they are. And we, I think women can sometimes be a little bit more ambitious or hopeful. And
optimistic.
Maybe, like just feel more agency in changing a situation when it comes to relationships,
right?
Than men do. At least that's been my experience.
And at least maybe spend more time thinking about it. Like men are just not thinking about, for the most part, I won't say all men, are not thinking about every day, like, how can I make my relationship better? And I think that it might flow in a woman's head once a week at least.
Probably at least. Whether it's like, what can I do for him, or what do I feel like I need that I'm not getting? Definitely.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe that could be a sister circle question, because I'm kind of curious. I know it's not our sister circle question, but I am curious, like, do we feel like men or women take more or think more about how to improve their relationship? And I'm just curious, not from like a judgment standpoint, but I wonder if how often men feel like they think about improving their relationship.
So that'd be an interesting survey.
Yeah.
We should ask Dalen to ask the men he gathers with.
Well, I'm going to ask TikTok. I'm going to post this. I'm going to post a little clip for our reel. I'm curious to see if any men will respond.
We shall.
And women, you can share too. Let us know how often you think about it. Don't answer for the men, please. I hate that. Let them answer for themselves. I'm curious. But you can let us know how often you think about it. So, moving
on. Something that I've found helpful in having some difficult conversations in my relationship. Not that like our relationship is difficult, but life is difficult.
Right.
And you go from navigating life independently to navigating it in partnership. And so you want to kind of move as one. And we found it helpful to just do like reading together on the topics or areas that we want to improve. And was this my idea? Absolutely. no surprise, but I very much appreciate my husband for coming along and being an active participant. At first, he was a little reluctant, but then as we got into it, it was like, oh, we haven't had a conversation about this, or oh, this is a good thing for us to look out for, or now that they mentioned it, actually, we should, bring up XYZ. So I wanted to share a few books, and I'll link them in the description as well. But for those of you who are coupled or booed up, or maybe even thinking about marriage, I just wanted to share some books that I thought would be helpful.
Or maybe you even have people are doing things differently. Maybe you are raising your kids with your bestie. I don't know. But,
yeah,
but y'all work together.
That's true. I suppose it could be for these could be for you individually, but I like to think on. But it's also for, I guess, any type of couple or group. So no discrimination here. The first one is Before We Say I Do, and I will preface by saying I am linking the books. I do not remember who wrote all of these. Mm-hmm. It's only 3. Don't get scared. Before We Say I Do, that was the one we read, although we did not finish it, before we got married, just to make sure we covered our bases, quote unquote, made sure we had the conversations that were most important to us. So thinking about things in relationship to family and what our views are there, finances, even just some of the smaller things like what we wanted the wedding to look like and how much we cared about the budget. And there were just a few things that book brought to us that we thought were helpful to just think about before you get married. You'd be surprised how many people get married without talking about how they envision their life. Or you hear somebody talk and they're a couple and one person is lavish lifestyle, wants to live in a high rise, luxury all the way, 5-star dinner, and the other person's like, I would love to live on a farm. Right. And it's like, I'm not saying
you find it so crazy though that people don't have those conversations.
Yeah. But I know it's difficult, right? It can cause conflict. But like I said, finding a third party or a book to kind of walk you through it alleviates some of that tension, because it's not like you brought it up,
right? Because you're not bringing it up like it was a problem. It's just it's in our book.
Yeah. Another one that we've read post marriage is called The Heart of Money. This one you can definitely read on your own, but it's really about understanding your own relationship to money and how that may affect your relationship with your partner. So let's say you really value, let's say your upbringing, you have a little bit of a scarcity mindset. Things weren't always guaranteed at home. And so now in adulthood, that plays out in things like being really frugal, having to stick to a specific budget, not feeling comfortable spending large amounts of money all at once, right? But you have a partner who maybe had the opposite experience.
They went out to eat every Wednesday.
They love eating out. Or maybe they didn't even have the opposite experience, but they had the opposite reaction to their situation, right? Mm-hmm. They instead feel like, I didn't have, so now I must go seek. And so their spending stresses you out, right? Because you feel scarcity while
they got new money,
while your frugalness stresses them out because they don't know why you're so stressed. So that was a really good one, just to kind of understand our money habits and our patterns and how they might cause conflict in our marriage. And so talking about them before they do. And then the last one, and this is probably my favorite one. I don't know do you know who Kev on Stage is?
Yeah, I knew you were going to say this book. She's told me about this book about 2 times.
I love him. So Kevin and Melissa Fredericks are internet personalities, and I'll put some respect on their names. He's a comedian, entrepreneur, and she is an influencer entrepreneur as well. I watch a lot of their content. But they did a book together. They've been married for, I guess, about 20 or so years now. And they're a little bit older than us, obviously. But I just appreciated their perspective on their marriage, from talking about the early days, because they've been together since high school, talking about raising their family. They have 2 boys. One is now going off to college. The other is a junior in high school, I think. And just
you be knowing about influencers' lives.
I read the book, girl. I read the book. But yeah, I do. This is a family I follow. Anyways, I just appreciated their honesty. And they also come from a Christian background. And so I related to a lot of shame and guilt that they felt around certain areas when it came to sex and
just relationships
in general, right? There's a lot we don't talk about. And so I appreciated hearing from people who also felt like we don't talk about this enough. And because they're only maybe like 10 years older than us, it felt like folks are just ahead of
Your
where
big brother telling you
yeah,
some
exactly.
facts.
And so if you're gonna read any of them, that would be the one I would do.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. I'll have to try some of those out. I think ultimately I've been living with my boyfriend for 2 years ish now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had similar conflict without the ring, but like obviously the things still happen. And I think goes back to like maybe some of these questions don't happen because they're not together enough. Like I know people are super big on not living with someone before you get married, but I feel like we didn't have any conflict before we started living together. We had no issues. So when we first started living together, the conflict was like, whoa. Excuse me.
Next level.
I don't argue. No, it wasn't even like next level. I just usually don't, you know me.
I don't have to engage with people in this way, and I don't engage with you in this way.
Right. And we haven't had to engage in this way because like we just get along.
Right. Because we haven't had anything to not get along about. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm just uplifting. Like I understand why maybe people don't have that conversation if they don't have that living together experience before they get married.
Yeah, and I think it's similar to what you pointed out with friendships, right? There might just not be anything for you to have conflict over because our lives don't overlap enough for there to be something that you've done that would affect me in a way that I need to.
Well, and I think maybe the level of depth in your relationship, like maybe you aren't really telling your friends all your dreams and aspirations, and maybe you're not going after them or you're not sharing them because you know they won't align. Versus like with your partner, you can't keep that stuff from them.
There's no compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
Or there ideally isn't.
Right. And so maybe that's why there's a little bit of a difference in your friendship because you don't feel as obligated to share all of the things about you. But, yeah.
So before we close, I did want to just touch on there are other spaces where you might encounter conflict outside of your intimate partner relationship. We named friendships already. There's obviously family conflict as well. And I think those are kind of similar, but you can also encounter it at work. I feel like that's a place you hear about often, people feeling like there's passive aggressive conversation, gossiping.
A good passive aggressive email. I love those.
Per my last email.
Please read it, Sarah.
Yeah, the other day I had to catch myself because I was this close to sending a passive aggressive message, but instead I was just direct and answered the question. But it was basically like, long story short, folks needed to do a presentation, and it was presentation time, and it was not running how it was supposed to be running. And then they messaged me like outside of the meeting, like, did you send us the stuff? And I almost the same way I have to pause and catch myself when somebody is not asking me a question, but instead,
telling me something to do.
I had to pause and catch myself and then be like, yes, I sent it to you 2 days ago when we talked about it in the meeting to prepare for this presentation. And that was all I said. But it took a lot for that to be all I said. Because I wanted to say, how dare you ask me? Don't act like this is my fault.
Right.
But they are very busy. They have their own lives, their own things going on. They didn't know where it was, and they were just asking. I interpreted it as, you didn't prepare us to do this thing.
See?
And say that's gotta reel it back.
Does your internal monologue put you in a conflict?
Yes, because there's no issue. There didn't have to be an issue. I did send it. Here's the link again.
I'm just overwhelmed and I haven't seen it, Taryn.
Right, exactly. So just a reminder to take a step back, because usually, unless you work in emergency work, it ain't an emergency. So take a step back, take a breath, find the link, send the team's message, whatever. The other place where conflict could arise, although for me personally, this hasn't been an experience I can really think of, it's just with strangers. We see videos on the internet all the time of strangers in conflict, whether it be road rage or people mad that somebody cut somebody in line or
this lady, I could already see my nana. We don't play with strangers who are rude.
It does make our skin
She used to
crawl.
be like, move. The grocery store, somebody's all in her space. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But I have had a few little conflicts with some strangers because
You
people are a
have?
little bit disrespectful. Not overtly, but the first one that came to my mind was I was on a walk with my friend. And there's obviously when you go on like walking trails, there's only so much space.
Right.
And when I was walking, I was looking at my friend. So I didn't see that there was somebody coming up. Like they had hit a corner, so they were coming up. And so I didn't see them, blah, 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 walking. And she just walks into me. Mind you, is looking at me, walks into me, and then she's like, oh my God, you just bumped me. And I'm very much like, so you walked into me, looking at me. And you can see that I was not
looking at you.
And you had the audacity. And I said, are you for it? And her husband. Because she was about to get it.
So she wasn't walking by herself either.
No.
So he probably also just witnessed it.
You could tell, right,
that wasn't the first time.
You could tell it wasn't the first time. And you could tell who had an issue with me. A Karen. Oh, Karen.
Because she expected you to move out her way.
She expected me to move out her way. And she was really about to learn that I wasn't. My Nana, she was feeding my spirit at that time. Because, oh my God. This old lady was about to catch some hands.
I love to see Taylor like this.
The way she really pissed me off. And I don't even know why I was so mad.
Was she old?
No, she wasn't. She was like 50.
Age?
Yeah, she was like 50.
Oh, okay.
But it was just like the amount of energy. I can't act it out because it was a couple years back now. But the amount of energy she gave me for like we barely. It was barely grazed each other, but I did touch her. So I get being bothered by that, but she was looking at me. Like you saw me coming. Right. You could have easily moved out of my way, but you chose to just run into me to have a
right after you just hit a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I don't think I think any situations I've had have been similar to yours, where they've mostly just been like, what you doing?
Right. Because we want to talk about it, we can.
Right. Because we can talk it down. Talk it down.
But anyway.
Deborah taught us to talk and talk.
No, not talk and talk. Terrence taught me to hit and hit.
Oh, well, I'm a talker. I'll talk you right.
Because I remember my daddy hopping out that car when we were at BJ's. Right. Anyway, we're
rambling. You were talking about the Warriors game.
Oh.
You remember that?
It's been a few times. Sorry, Dad.
You just be ready to pop the trunk. Literally.
Anyway, that made me have some tears. All right. We're closing. It's our sister circle time. Oh my gosh. It's my week. I'm tearing for real. I was really remembering him at BJ's ready to okay.
This is we get our fire from our family.
Our sister circle question for the week, because we need to wrap this up. We're just rambling at this point, is basically what's a secret or something that you've been holding on to? Because maybe it's not a secret. Maybe it's something you just want to communicate, but you haven't because you're afraid of what conflict might come from it. And just really sit with that. Ask yourself that. You can share it with us in the comments. We'd love to know. But obviously, if it's private, that's okay too. But really think about what is something you've held on to that you could probably communicate and maybe find yourself some peace. Or are you internalizing something that maybe you could think about it differently?
Because sometimes, boo, it's you.
Oof. Hate to say it.
It be me all the time.
But yeah, so anyway, we want to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye.